you know that between January to the end of the season, Manchester United had the most points won by any team in the league? Yes, they were first, Arsenal was second, and Manchester City was third. Ladies and gentlemen, the Premier League is back, and I think everybody can agree with me that we think the Premier League is one of the best, if not the best league in the world. And it feels almost impossible to predict what is going to happen from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. However, I'm going to put my neck on the line and I'm going to predict exactly what is going to happen from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Be careful what you wish for, because this is basically a spoiler alert. Today we are going to talk about the top 6, who's going to get relegated at the end of the season, the top scorer, the top assists, the surprise team of the season, and as always, who's going to be celebrating at the end of the season by winning the Premier League title. Let's get into it. Now, some of my predictions are going to be fairly obvious. There are certain things you will expect this season. However, some of them are going to be a little bit controversial, but stick with me. You're really going to love this. In 18th place in the Premier League, after careful consideration, I have Crystal Palace. Now, I know Crystal Palace fans are going to come for me. You're probably going to say, what is this guy talking about? He probably doesn't know what he's saying. But hear me out. Crystal Palace, during the last 6 months, have lost Maguire, they have lost Oliver Glasner, they have lost Lacroix. Now, they have lost their 2 starting centre-backs, and now they have a very thin defensive line. The Premier League is a very unforgiving league. Do you really expect Crystal Palace to survive with a very thin defensive line, knowing that the attackers have a huge job on their hands to basically outscore everything they play? I think that's a very, very impossible task, if you ask me. So with that being said, I think they will find it difficult to be able to beat every team that comes up against them. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Crystal Palace have no ability to stay in the league. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying with what the evidence has shown me, I think they are going to find it difficult to find or to keep their place in the Premier League in the coming season. So I have Crystal Palace in 18th. And then in 19th, I have Ipswich Town. Now, Ipswich Town, unfortunately for you, I think you're going to go back exactly the way you came up. I think you're going to find it difficult because the Premier League is very hard and intense. The signings you people have made is very, very unflattering. I do not expect Ipswich Town to come up and be able to take the league by surprise by having or by winning a bunch of games where they are not supposed to win. Now, I'm not saying they will not win some games. They will probably win some games, but they'll probably be winning against teams of lesser qualities. I think they'll find it very difficult to retain or to beat teams who are in the upper half of the table, right? And then I would expect their home matches to be very difficult for teams who are challenging for European places and the title. But I would expect ultimately over a 38-game season, I expect Ipswich Town to find it very, very difficult, and I have them finishing 19th at the end of the season. And then finishing 20th, it feels like everybody's prediction is saying the same thing. And I'm going to stick with what my analysis has given me. I have Hull City finishing 20th. Now, Hull City is a very good team. Don't get me wrong. They are a championship level team. First of all, they came up in a very, very lucky way, if I am not being too harsh on Hull City fans, right? They basically stumbled their way into the playoffs. They basically also stumbled their way into winning the playoffs against Southampton and ultimately getting their promotion into the Premier League. But unfortunately, the Premier League is a very, very tough league. I would expect them to ultimately have difficulties over a 38-game season and then go back down. I have Hull City finishing 20th. And now we move up to the top of the table. My top 6 is as follows. In 6th position, I have Aston Villa. You're probably thinking, Aston Villa were top 5 last season. Why would you think Aston Villa will finish 6th this season? I'll tell you why. Aston Villa have lost Morgan Rogers. Aston Villa is about to lose Dibu Martinez. Aston Villa has lost Yuri Tillemans to Manchester United. Aston Villa is clearly depleted. Now they have brought in some players. They have brought in Zamzi, which is a very, very good midfielder, as we saw with his performances in the World Cup. They still have Unai Emery, which I think is one of the top 3 coaches in the league. But ultimately, they still have the Champions League to contend about. Yes, they have the squad capable of contending, juggling both the Champions League and the league. And they've shown in the past seasons that they are capable of playing very, very good football that will obviously detract or hinder teams that have title ambitions or European places ambitions, especially at Villa Park. But ultimately, I think they would fall short of qualifying for the Champions League in the coming season because they have lost considerable talent which they are yet to replace. Unless they make the desired signings before the transfer window ends, I would expect them to finish sixth. In fifth place is where I have a little bit of a controversial thought. A lot of people might not agree with me, but I have Manchester City finishing in fifth. Let me tell you why. Pep Guardiola is gone. As at the time of recording, Rodri has agreed a deal with Barcelona. Bernardo Silva is gone. Enzo Maresca is a new coach. He has to implement his pattern, his tactics, and his style to these players. Yes, he still has Pep Guardiola's team available to him. Yes, they still have Erling Haaland. So a lot of people would say, as long as there's Erling Haaland, Manchester City still have a chance to challenge for the title. In its rights, yes, I would agree with them. But you also have to consider the fact that the main core of players or entities that were responsible for Manchester City having control and having the dominance over the Premier League for a long while was Pep Guardiola, Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne, and Rodri. 4 of those entities are now gone. What that means is the remaining players have to now push up. Now they have been able to bring in Elliot Anderson for £116 million. Do we really expect Elliot Anderson to be the guy to replace Rodri? The control he has exerted over the Premier League and the midfield over the last decade. Do you really think Elliot Anderson can do that? I don't think so. Maybe you can. Maybe you tell me why. But ultimately, those are the factors that I think will hinder Manchester City's title challenge in the upcoming season. I don't really expect them to fall off completely out of the European places, but I would expect them to get the 5th spot. So I actually expect Manchester City to finish 5th in the upcoming season. And in 4th, I have Liverpool Football Club. Liverpool fans will probably come for my head, but hear me out. Liverpool Football Club have a new coach in Andoni Iraola. Now, we do not know what Liverpool will look like under Iraola, and their pre-season fixtures are a little bit left to be desired, right? We do not know what Liverpool will be like under Iraola, but we know Iraola is a good coach. Liverpool still have a lot of holes in their team. They still need a backup defender. Now, do you think Van Dijk and Araujo is a starting or a title contending centre-back pairing? I don't really think so. Now, Van Dijk is a little bit advanced in age. Araujo has a tendency to be very, very aggressive and overzealous. So we do not know how that will transform into the Premier League. But I think they have a squad good enough to challenge for the European places, right? Now, in attack is where I think Liverpool have a problem. They haven't really necessarily replaced Mo Salah's goals. We do not know how Isak's injury history would look like this season. If Isak is able to regain his Newcastle form, I would expect Liverpool to do well, because if Isak is able to do well, Liverpool will do well. Because right now, he's going to be the only person likely to replace Isak's goals. Now, in attack, they have Cody Gakpo, they have Rio Ngomoa, and they also have Bruce. Does that attack look like an attack capable of challenging for the title? Obviously not. I don't think so. I'm sure you would agree with me. But they still have a very stable core that I think in turn will be able to help them solidify a place in the Champions League. That is why I have Liverpool finishing 4th. In 3rd place, I have Chelsea. People will probably come at me and say, why do you have Chelsea finishing 3rd when they finished 10th last season? I understand that. I completely understand. But I think the fact that they will not have any Europe next season will be an added advantage. 1. 2, they have a coach that has a system that has worked for him in the past, in Xabi Alonso, when he won the league with Leverkusen in Bundesliga. Now, they have brought in a lot of players. They have brought in about 12 players, which a lot of people will say that's too much. I think it affects team chemistry. I understand. I completely understand why you would think it affects team chemistry. But think about the players they have brought in for a second. They have brought in Henderson and Welbeck. Those are two very important players in the long run, which will bring in a certain level of experience and dressing room, dressing room compatibility, because they will be like the leaders in the team. They still have their existing midfield core of Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo. and Levia. So you still have Kopama available. They have brought back Jackson. Now I'm seeing that Liam Delap is up for sale, which is not a problem. So if they have Delap up for sale, they have a starting three strikers of Danny Welbeck, Jao Pedro, and Nicholas Jackson, which I think is a very good attack considering what the Premier League, other Premier League teams have to offer. So I would think then Morgan Rogers is available. Now, Morgan Rogers is a maverick. He's a player capable of pulling something out of nothing. And then if you couple the fact that they have Morgan Rogers and Kopama, Chelsea have an attack capable of sustaining a title charge. That doesn't necessarily mean they would challenge for the title. What they lack in cohesion, they make up for it in star power. And then they were able to bring in Lacroix from Crystal Palace, which I think is a very, very good defender, if you are being very honest. I think he's a good defender, but I don't think he's a title-winning defender. So if you add Lacroix to the defense they already had existing, and then they still have Roberto Sanchez, which I don't think is a very good goalkeeper, but it's good enough to help them secure a third place finish as I have predicted in the coming season. Then in second place, I have Manchester United. Now, Manchester United is an unknown entity under Michael Carrick. Yes, not necessarily unknown in the sense that Michael Carrick did a very good job from January to the end of the season. In fact, did you know that between January to the end of the season, Manchester United had the most points won by any team in the league? Yes, they were first, Arsenal was second, and Manchester City were third. So I think with a small sample size of 5 months, Michael Carrick has shown that he at least deserves a chance to try to turn Manchester United around. Now, the only reason, one of the caveats I have with Manchester United is the fact that they were only able to play one game every 10 days during that period. They did not have any other competition to worry about. They were dumped out of the FA Cup, they were dumped out of the Carabao Cup, and there was no Europe for them. So it felt like they had all their eggs in the Premier League baskets, and their players were well rested, and they were able to rotate and have top conditioning for all the players, which allowed them to perform at their absolute best physical and mental ability. But now, this season, they have different expectations from last season. This season, there's expectations of at least challenging for the title or securing Champions League football. They have the expectations of going far in the Champions League, not necessarily winning, but at least going far. They have expectations of going to the latter stages of both domestic cups. So I think balancing 4 competitions is going to be basically be a new territory for Michael Carrick's Manchester United. Now they have brought in some players. They have brought in Andrew Santos. They have brought in Yuri Tillemans. It feels like they are trying to solve their defensive issues going forward. They're trying to balance their midfield going forward, because I feel like the midfield has been a problem for Manchester United going forward. But I think Michael Carrick has the tactical acumen to build a team capable of sustaining a reasonable title challenge and then qualifying for European places come the end of the season. So with that being said, I have Manchester United finishing second, and then returning the league and winning the English Premier League back to back. I have Arsenal. Now, I'm not saying it is a foregone conclusion that Arsenal is going to win, but having the evidence available to me, picture this. Arsenal have the longest serving coach in the Premier League. Arsenal have the best squad in terms of depth in the Premier League. Arsenal have cohesion in the sense that they have the same number of players coming back. Yes, they have injuries to William Saliba, and we don't really know the fitness of Declan Rice and Saka this season. But they have been able to bring in Bruno Guimaraes to augment and supplement Rice. Can either play with Rice or play without Rice and have a stable midfield. They still have a midfield depth of Bruno Guimaraes, Declan Rice, Luis Kelly, Martin Odegaard, Martin Zubimendi, Merino, and Eze. That is a title-winning midfield depth. So I think the only issue we will have with Arsenal going forward is the attack. Do you think an attack of Gyökeres and Havertz is good enough to sustain a title challenge and possibly try to win the Champions League in the same season? I would say yes, because last season this was the same attack Arsenal used to win the league and get to the Champions League final. Now, the main issue with Arsenal's attack has been the left side. But as you can see with Zolis feels like a smart addition for Arsenal. I would expect the team to retain the Premier League. But as of right now, I am expecting Arsenal to still have one or two major signings, probably a left winger before the transfer window closes. If they are able to get that over the line, I would expect Arsenal to go far or want to make them one of the favorites to win the Champions League this season. To run through my predictions, I have Crystal Palace finishing in 18th, Ipswich Town finishing in 19th, and Hull City finishing 20th. Those are the relegation teams. I have Aston Villa finishing 6th. I have Man City finishing 5th. I have Liverpool finishing 4th, Chelsea 3rd, Manchester United finishing 2nd, and Arsenal winning the title. And then my surprise team of the season. A lot of people will probably be thinking, who do I think he's going to give us? But let me surprise you people. Drum roll. Actually have my surprise team as Newcastle. You're probably going to say, Newcastle, why Newcastle? Let me explain. Newcastle is a team that have lost 3 key players and 4 key members of their entire team. They have lost Anthony Gordon to Barcelona. They have lost Sandro Tonali to Tottenham. They have lost Bruno Guimaraes to Arsenal, and then Eddie Howe has quit his job. So that has been the spine for Newcastle in the upcoming season. So naturally, people will expect Newcastle to probably tumble down the table. Last season, they finished in the mid-tables, right? So you probably think because they finished in the mid-table, they will not be doing well, having lost all those people I have just mentioned. But that is very, very wrong. I'm telling you that what probably people are thinking is wrong. Newcastle is going to do far better than they did last season. I'm actually predicting Newcastle to finish in the top half of the table and push the likes of Aston Villa for the last conference and Europa League spots. Yes, I said it. I expect Newcastle to do very, very well. A lot of people will be very, very surprised by what Newcastle is going to be able to achieve this season. I think they might get to the semi-finals of one of the domestic cups this season. Yes, I said it. I expect them to do well, and then that is why I have come to the conclusion that they are my surprise package this season, or my surprise team this season. Now, over to the top scorer. This is the most obvious. In fact, this is the easiest prediction anybody is going to make this season. We all expect Erling Haaland to be the top scorer, with no surprises there. Now, the top assist is where I think I'm going to surprise the people. A lot of people will probably think Bruno Fernandes is going to be the top assist. You are very wrong. Do you know who I think is going to be the top assist? Drum roll. I have Bukayo Saka. Yes, I said it. I'm an Arsenal fan. I'm going to be biased. It sounds like I'm going to be biased, but I'm not. Arsenal have slowly but surely built a team that is capable of winning the league as they did last season and going to the latter stages of the Champions League. Bukayo Saka had an injury-hampered season last season. As you saw, he played less games than he has ever played in an Arsenal title challenging season. But I think he has properly rested this season. He had a very good World Cup. He had a hat-trick in the bronze medal game. So I would expect him to do well this season, and I have him as my top assist man. Anyways, there you have it. My top scorer is Erling Haaland. My top assist is Bukayo Saka. And my surprise team is Newcastle. Now, let me know your thoughts. Who do you think is going to win the league? Who do you think is going to get the other European places? Who do you think is going to be the top scorer? Let me know your thoughts below. And as always, please like and subscribe because it massively helps me out so we can build this community together. Thank you. And as always, until next time.